Tonight, the stock market free fall, halting trading as the coronavirus ripples across the globe.
The Pope praying for those affected, worship sites closing around the world, and churches changing long-held traditions.
We told the people they should not shake hands or give kiss.
And communities across the country work to grapple with the outbreak.
There probably are cases in the state of Virginia that we just haven't identified.
Plus the latest on the Democratic presidential race.
We're going to win this election.
The coalition forming against Bernie Sanders.
Get up! Let's take back this country!
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
From Main Street to Wall Street, panic in the global markets. Welcome to Faith Nation, and thanks for joining us. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Browder. We begin with the latest on the coronavirus situation. The number of cases in the U.S. surging this week as the virus spreads to 34 states.
This as global financial markets tumble due to the uncertainty of the ongoing outbreak. CBN Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson joins us now with more on how the virus has spread and hit the halls of Congress.
But first, the U.S. Surgeon General Jerome Adams. CBN White House correspondent Ben Kennedy is with him on the North Lawn. Ben?
Well, Jenna, John, the total of infected cases here in the U.S. has topped more than 500 with nearly 24 deaths. And as you were talking about, joining us now is the U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Jerome Adams. Thank you so much, sir, for being here with us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And clearly the virus is spreading. Who is at risk? What age group are you telling people to avoid flying, don't board that cruise, avoid crowds?
Well, great question. First of all, the coronavirus comes from a family of viruses that causes the cold, SARS, and MERS, and in most people it's going to cause a mild flu-like syndrome. We know that no one under the age of 30 has died in South Korea. No one under the age of 50 has died in Japan. But we do know there are some high-risk groups, and we want people to be aware if they're at high risk. Seniors who have chronic medical conditions such as heart disease, lung disease, kidney disease, or they're immunosuppressed, maybe they're getting cancer treatments, actually are much more likely to get coronavirus and much more likely to have severe complications or even death.
Dr. Adams, you've been to the store lately, you've noticed masks and hand sanitizers are sold out. The big question is, do they work? Are they effective in stopping the spread of the virus?
Well, masks are not effective in preventing the general public from getting coronavirus. Most masks just protect other people from you. They don't protect you from them. And we know that if people hoard masks, they won't be available for healthcare providers. The other thing that's important for folks to know is if you don't know how to wear an N95, that cone-shaped mask, properly, people will often touch their face and increase their risk of being exposed to germs. Now, hand sanitizer does work, but it doesn't work as good as good old-fashioned hand washing. Washing your hand for 20 seconds with soap and water, making sure you're getting the front and back and in between your fingers and fingernails.
Dr. Adams, the campaign season is among us as we head up to 2020. President Trump is 73 years old. He shakes lots of hands. He interacts with thousands of people at his rally. What advice are you giving him?
Well, the advice I'm giving him is the advice I give everyone else out there. Be aware of your risk factors. Again, it's being a senior, but also having chronic medical conditions, and take precautions. Washing your hands frequently, making sure you're using hand sanitizer. If you can't wash your hands, making sure you're staying away from people who appear to be sick.
If you are under the at-risk age group, if you have travel plans coming up, what advice are you giving them, whether it comes to flights or travel?
Well, I'm answering this question from my own parents out there right now. If you are a senior and you have chronic medical conditions, now's probably the time to hunker down. I would definitely not advise taking a cruise. I would avoid a long-haul flight. If that's not essential. And again, we'd wait a couple weeks for this peak to happen. We're going to see more cases. Unfortunately, we're going to see more deaths, but we expect that, and we expect to see more diagnoses as we test more. Just chill out for a little bit, wait for us to hit the peak and for us to start to see this go back down again, and then we'll feel it's much more safe for those at-risk people to be out and about.
Speaking of more cases, New York is seeing additional cases. They're asking for more testing. Do you plan to have more people being checked as we move on?
Well, absolutely. We expect testing to go up tremendously over the next week. We went from several thousand tests last week to 1 million tests out there right now, and we expect it to be 4 million by the end of this week. So we will see more positives. We want people to be able to find out quickly if they are at risk, if their doctor thinks they need a test.
My final question for you. You are a part of the coronavirus task force, set to have a press briefing here in a very short while. Any bit of a sneak peek? What do you plan to discuss this week?
Well, one of the things we're going to be emphasizing is that we're shifting from a containment to a mitigation posture. Containment is when you're trying to keep the virus out, and that was easier to do when most of the cases were in China. It's harder to do when you've got cases all over the world: Belgium, Switzerland, Italy, South Korea. And so we want communities to be prepared. You will likely see a few coronavirus cases in your community by the time this is all said and done, but that doesn't mean that people have to be harmed, that people have to die. If we protect those who are most at risk, then we'll get through this the way we've gotten through SARS and MERS and other such problems in the past.
All right, Dr. Jerome Adams, U.S. Surgeon General, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And as you heard Dr. Adams mention a while ago, he is talking about stressing preparedness over panic, and that includes avoiding large crowds. If you happen to be sick, definitely self-quarantine yourself, but also to avoid people or close contact with those that are sick. Also, don't touch your nose, hand, and mouth, and also wash your hands frequently. Back to you.
All right, great advice from the Surgeon General. Ben, thank you very much. Well, another very volatile day on Wall Street. Today, trading stopped for the first time in a decade. The combination of crashing oil prices and renewed fears over a coronavirus outbreak sent stocks plunging 7%. That drop in the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones sliding 1,800 points within minutes of the opening bell led to an automatic shutoff, halting all trading for a full 15 minutes. The administration has called on Wall Street executives to meet with President Trump at the White House to discuss the response to the outbreak.
And here now for more on today's stock market plunge is Joel Griffith, research fellow with the Heritage Foundation focusing on financial regulations. Joel, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So what should most Americans make of what we saw early this morning with the stock market plunge?
But it's important to not panic and make the decisions that we make fully informed as possible, and talk to our advisors, and also realize that although this type of a plunge overnight is rare, we haven't had a drop like this in years. This was on par with the 2008 drop of around 8%. The markets over time have, up until now, always recovered. It might not be next month or next quarter, but we need to keep, if it's for retirement purposes, we need to keep that long-term picture in mind.
So we saw or witnessed what's called the so-called stock market circuit breaker. Can you explain what happened?
Yep. So overnight, traders can go ahead and trade what's called the futures, and that gives an indication of how far up and down the market will open, and that actually triggered a stop. If the market moves on the downside more than 7%, they actually have to pause in trading. So when the market opened this morning, it very quickly hit that 7% level and had to freeze until about 9:50. And then there's another stop. If it goes down 13%, it also has to stop. If it goes down 20% trading, if it's not late in the day, it's done for the day. So we've actually seen a bit of a rebound since then, but that's really put in place to allow people to think clearly, get their wits about them, because you don't want to see that panic spread needlessly.
Yeah. Amid the coronavirus fears, we're also seeing oil prices, plunging. Are these two connected, Joel?
So they're somewhat interconnected, but we've seen oil prices weakening over this quarter, and that's largely because there has been a decrease in demand, and a lot of that decrease in demand has been because the coronavirus has caused economic output and activity to decline in China. But what we saw this weekend, that has not happened since 1991. We saw oil prices plunge about 30%, but that was unrelated. That was a situation where OPEC was trying to work together with Russia to try to suppress production, and Russia at the end of the day said, we're out. We're not going to participate in this. And so now Saudi Arabia has promised to just have a gusher of supply hit the market, a huge increase of 7 million barrels per day next month.
You had mentioned the earlier stock market reaction that was similar to the one that we saw today. How has this market reaction, though, been different than previous outbreaks?
If you go back 35 years, we've seen 11 epidemics that have occurred across the globe. I think it's really interesting to look at what's happened 6 months later. And even one of those instances, our stock market has actually been higher than the day prior to the outbreak. This one is a bit different, both in terms of the virus, but also we're in a social media age, and we see information whether accurate or not, spread a lot more rapidly. And so I think that having that information can be a positive because we're able to be alert to what is going on. But in some cases, it actually enhances the fear, and not always is that fear warranted. And I think that is part of what we've seen the last few weeks with the volatility in the market, and now being down 20% over the last few weeks.
All right, Joel Griffith with the Heritage Foundation. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Joel. Well, tonight, as they work together to fight the spread of the novel coronavirus, countries are increasing travel restrictions and quarantines across the globe.
Yeah, today the Grand Princess cruise ship arriving off the coast of California. And as the viral spread hits the halls of Congress, some lawmakers are already under quarantine. CBN News Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson joins us now. And Abigail, lawmakers are flying back to Washington today. As they come back from their districts and their states, are there concerns that they're meeting people, shaking hands, and bringing back those potentially, those germs?
Yes. We are hearing a lot of reports that lawmakers are expressing concerns because, remember, they've been going home for weeks. And when most of them go home, they attend multiple public events. They shake tons of hands, and then they fly back to D.C., in many cases going through very busy airports. Now, on top of that, the most vulnerable to this virus are those over the age of 70, which is about a third of the U.S. Senate and many House members, including most of Democrat leadership and many chairmen. Now, right now, they are still expected to fly back and forth from D.C. to their districts, which is making quite a few staff members nervous. Then you add to the fact that they work in a building where hundreds of tourists come through every day during a time right now we're heading into spring break. There's an uptick in the number of people visiting, and they don't want to cause panic right now by shutting the Capitol down. But leadership is encouraging offices to prepare teleworking plans and possibly see some changes to come.
So, Abigail, based on the fears, are any lawmakers staying home this week?
Well, yes, right now we know of 3, one being Senator Ted Cruz, who plans to stay in Texas because he came into contact with the person who tested positive at CPAC. Another person, Congressman Paul Gosar from Arizona, also found out over the weekend that he came into contact with that same person, is in self-quarantine. And then Congressman Doug Collins. Now, none of these members have coronavirus symptoms, but they are self-quarantining. And we know that with Paul Gosar's office, he's closing his D.C. office for a week. And I think it's important, though, as we hear of all this news, just to remind everyone that the Bible tells us not to be afraid, to not live in fear. I tweeted out a verse from Philippians this morning, Philippians 4:6-9, that says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." And we just need to remember to fight the fear and the pandemonium with prayers for protection, prayers for healing, and prayers for an end to this horrible disease, because God is so much greater than this coronavirus. So just keep a level head.
Yeah, all right, a good word. All right, Abigail Robertson, thank you very much. Well, city officials want hundreds of people who attend church here in Washington, D.C. to self-quarantine. The church's preacher has tested positive for coronavirus.
Meanwhile, the church has suspended all services and activities as a precaution as fears of possible outbreaks affect faith communities here and abroad.
Padre, Figlio, Spirito Santo.
In an extraordinary move, Pope Francis live-streamed Monday morning Mass at the Vatican to show solidarity with people suffering from coronavirus. The Vatican made a similar move a day earlier to discourage large crowds that sometimes peak to 40,000. For the undeterred, the Pope did not disappoint, briefly waving to the sparse crowd. Fears also gripping France, which now trails Italy with the second most coronavirus cases in Europe. The government's ban on gatherings of more than 1,000 people could shut down the congregation at Paris Christian Center, where they welcomed 15 new converts Sunday.
Many churches have decided to close their service. If the government asks us to close down our service, we are ready, to stream from our website and from YouTube.
At Sunday services in Greenwood, Colorado, rather than handshakes, parishioners greeted each other with elbow and fist bumps during the passing of the peace. The church taking extra measures for communion, too.
So we're trying to be careful to make sure that our servers have their hands well cleaned and that people know how to be careful and thoughtful when they receive the bread and the wine.
Last week in Bethlehem, the Church of the Nativity, believed to be the site where Jesus was born, shut its doors as a precaution. Other places of worship in the region closed for up to 2 weeks for safety. And after shuttering Islam's holiest site, Saudi Arabia temporarily reopened the Grand Mosque in Mecca for Muslim pilgrims.
And as the world battles to contain and beat back the spread of coronavirus, churches are confronted with striking that delicate balance between prayer and prevention. We'll be right back.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug of war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Welcome back. Well, last week it was Super Tuesday, and this week you could call it Mini Tuesday.
That's right, Jenna. The next face-off between Democratic frontrunner Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders will go down tomorrow in 6 primaries and caucuses.
We're taking on the political establishment. We're going to win this election.
Get up! Let's take back this country.
If I'm a comeback kid, there's only one reason I'll come back. The African American community all around the country.
As moderate Democrats form a coalition in favor of Biden, Sanders is taking aim at the former VP. Biden leads Sanders in the latest polls in the battleground state of Michigan, which is considered a major prize in tomorrow's contest.
And we want to bring in CBN's chief political analyst, David Brody, to help break down some of the news of the day. David, Sanders, he beat Hillary Clinton back in 2016. In Michigan. Can he have another upset this time around?
I think it's looking very doubtful at this point. And by the way, he beat Hillary barely by a percentage point or two. It was also a caucus back then. This year it's a primary. Look, the latest poll shows Biden up by 24 points in Michigan. That's not good news for Bernie. So look, I think the way this is going to go, if actually Bernie loses Michigan, let's say just by a little bit, then he stays in. If he loses by a lot and it's a blowout, look, I think it's game, set, match because you had what's their names now? Buttigieg, that's right. And Klobuchar endorsing. Now you got that second wave that Kamala Harris and Booker are now endorsing. So it's a coalescing for sure.
When do you think Senator Warren will drop her potential endorsement?
Well, I think it becomes obsolete at this point. I mean, if Bernie loses Michigan by a whopping margin, then I think he gets out, and that's that. And even if he doesn't get out, I think this just shows you that Bernie will not only potentially, or will lose the nomination, but Elizabeth Warren clearly will then endorse Biden, most likely.
David, real quickly, back to our top story about the coronavirus. Yeah. The media is really playing up the split between the administration and federal health officials. Will the administration's handling affect Trump's approval and even more yet, his re-election bid?
I think he has there's a real concern here. You know, Trump doesn't do the emotional, the kind of the glad handing and this, this whole like consoler in chief. That's what I'm trying to say, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a problem. Coronavirus needs that, and he's not there. Also, the economy will start to tank a little bit, and that is obviously not good as well.
What about the messaging?
Yeah, well, I mean, the messaging, look, here's the problem. Trump is not disciplined when it comes, Trump is his own messenger, but the problem is he sometimes forgets to tell federal health officials. That's a problem.
Yeah. All right, David, we have to leave it there.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll be right back.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
And ministering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to cbnnewschannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Welcome back. Communities across the country are bracing for the potential impact of coronavirus, sending local health departments into overdrive, trying to manage what could become a worst-case scenario.
Yeah, CBN News national security correspondent Eric Phillips takes us to Richmond, Virginia, where officials are trying to be as proactive as they possibly can be.
There probably are cases in the state of Virginia that we just haven't identified.
Dr. Danny Avila serves as public health director for the city of Richmond and neighboring Henrico County. He says COVID-19's elusive nature makes it difficult to spot and stop.
One of the challenges is that when 80+% of individuals who get the virus have really kind of indistinguishable cold symptoms, they can transmit the virus to people who are much more susceptible to it without really knowing it.
That alone, he adds, significantly increases chances the disease spreads to this community.
I'm very concerned.
Why?
Because people don't know how to cover their mouth.
I'm scared for more older people and younger people, but not necessarily for myself.
Hoping to address growing concerns, health and emergency management leaders here have activated an incident management team for the region.
And so now, instead of each locality having to make their own kind of best guesses or decisions based on the information they have, that will all be streamlined through a regional infrastructure. The decisions that we make collectively about whether to hold a basketball game or, that affects not just the people in one locality, but those have regional implications.
That also includes decisions like closing schools, businesses, or even advising churches to cancel service.
I mean, if we're having widespread transmission and we're starting to see deaths here in Virginia, and again, I fully expect all of those things to happen, then I think there will be clear guidance to faith communities and congregations to say, you know, maybe we do a web service this week or for this period of time. We probably do need to make changes in the way that we're delivering communion.
So I think the church has an opportunity here, really, to show that it will practice its faith over fear.
Richmond Community Church Senior Pastor Rick McDaniel says he doesn't foresee canceling any services.
I think we would always have church, and we always have the doors of the church open. We'd always have services, and then people would have to make up their own decisions about whether they want to come or not.
Now, states have the ability to test locally for COVID-19 rather than having to send samples to the CDC in Atlanta. Still, Avila says the availability of test kits is limited, and the required criteria for testing means cases will slip through the cracks.
That was Eric Phillips reporting. Thank you, Eric. Well, coming up, a super site is coming to us. A night sky near you. That's next.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5 Wednesday night at 9:30.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Finally tonight, as winter comes to a close, two unique events combine to make for a pretty spectacular scene in the sky tonight.
That's right. The final full moon of the winter season is called a supermoon. Did you know that, Jenna?
I had heard about it before.
Well, you know more than I do. It occurs when the moon is closest to the Earth's orbit. These conditions mean the moon will appear much larger and brighter than normal. And the best time to catch a glimpse is right after sunset. Tonight's supermoon will last through Tuesday night. Some Christians call the last full moon of winter the Lenten moon for the period of Lenten fasting before Easter. The next full moon, called the pink moon, is set to rise a few days ahead of Easter Sunday, and that's perfect timing.
It is very, very appropriate. You know, though, if it's the end of winter, I'm all for it. So
no complaints
bring it
here.
in.
No complaints here.
All right, well, that's going to do it for Faith Nation.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you back tomorrow.